Hey guys, it's Alexis, aka The Sloth Reader, and I'm here today to do another Top 5 Wednesday video. Top 5 Wednesday is hosted by Thoughts on Tome, so I will link her channel as well as the Goodreads group where we post all the topics and links and such down below. This week's topic is our favorite children's book, so that's basically meant to be middle grade and below, and we're supposed to leave out Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, so I have not included either or on this list. So these were varying levels of children's books on this list, but these were all books that I read as a kid, that I loved as a kid, that like as an adult I still consider these books to be favorite books of mine because I just loved them as a kid. The first one I'm going to mention is the one that was in the thumbnail, and that is my favorite picture book, and that is Jumanji by Chris Van Allsburg. This is actually the 30th anniversary edition, which comes with like a CD of it being read by Robin Williams, and like I can't, because every time I think about that it makes me so sad. But I love Jumanji, and Jumanji was one of my favorite movies as a kid as well, and so I loved this story. I loved the illustrations in them, and just I remember being a kid and having this and the Polar Express, both by Chris Van Allsburg, read to me as like a kid in elementary school in the library with like the teacher in her chair, and she like shows you the illustrations and like reads them to you. So yes, I absolutely love Jumanji as an adult. If I'm like not having a good day and I just want to like not be an adult for a couple of minutes, I'll go back and still look at some of the illustrations in Jumanji, and I just love it. The next one I'm going to mention is Fever 1793 by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is the first Laurie Halse Anderson book I ever read, and believe it or not, this is the edition of this book I still have from like Hurricane Katrina. And this is about our main character, Maddie, who lives with her family and helps her family run their coffee shop, and so it takes place in 1793 when a yellow fever epidemic broke out in the New England, Washington, D.C. area, and so it's about Maddie and her family basically struggling with this awful epidemic, and a bunch of people died, and it's about them trying to handle the disease outbreak, and so her and her grandfather like go on a run to try and escape the disease, and they basically just can't outrun it. It's actually a pretty sad book, just as a heads up, but it's kind of funny that like I loved this book as a kid, because as an adult, if I read this again, I would still love it, because pandemics and epidemics and diseases are like my thing. I went to school for them, so like it's interesting that like 15 years ago me also still really enjoyed this book. But yeah, Fever 1793, Laurie Halse Anderson. The next book I'm going to mention is Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. I read this when I was in the 7th grade or so. And this follows our main character, Winnie Foster, as she goes on an adventure and meets up with the Tuck family who live in the woods outside of her small town. And as she gets to know the Tucks, she discovers that they have a secret, which is that they drank from a spring and basically have been given immortality. And so this book is a lot about Winnie and her relationship with the Tucks, but it's also about the Tucks' relationship with each other and their relationship with the immortality they have. Some of them think it's a curse and some of them think it's a gift. And it's so good. It's a short little book, but I loved it. I loved it the first time I read it. I still love as an adult. The movie featuring Alexis Bledel, I absolutely love, highly recommend. The musical that just came out a few years ago, I absolutely loved and highly recommend. And just, I love Tuck Everlasting. It's a story that every time I'm experiencing it, I fall more and more in love with it, ever since I was like 12 years old, so highly recommend it if you haven't picked it up yet. The next one I'm going to mention is one I think is a lot of people's favorite books from when they were a kid, and that is The Giver by Lois Lowry. Of course, this is about a false utopian future where people basically don't have choice anymore. There's no color in the world. There's really no expression and emotion in the world. And it follows our main character Jonas as he is assigned the job to be an apprentice to the Giver. And the Giver is basically the holder of the memories for society, and so it's his job to give these memories to Jonas so that he can carry on the history of these people basically. And it's about Jonas learning the full expanse of human emotions through his apprenticeship with the Giver. And this book, man, this was the first book to ever make me cry. I remember sitting in bed reading this story and just crying my eyes out, because there's this one part that like as an adult still gets to me. But yes, and it's also like no surprise that I loved this as a kid, because as an adult dystopians and false utopians are still my thing. So it's interesting because like I don't know if my tastes have changed since I was like 8, 9 years old. That's interesting because I still like pretty much the exact same stuff I did then. But yeah, The Giver's just is a classic book. I loved it. I love it now. The last one I'm going to mention is my favorite book series from when I was a kid. This is the series I credit with getting me into reading. I got every book on release date, and I remember feeling this overwhelming sense of sadness when the series finally ended. But yes, this series to me was what Harry Potter was to a lot of people, which I'm sure people are going to hate me saying it that way, but it was, and that is the Land of Ilion series by Patrick Carman, the first book being The Dark Hills Divide. This follows our main character, Alexa Daly, as she basically gets sent on this massive quest to save her land from an evil, and she discovers friends and enemies along the way, and she discovers a lot of secrets about herself and her family as well. And this was the first book where I was just in love with it, and I felt like I was going on this journey with Alexa. I remember especially in this first book, there's this one scene where like still as an adult would probably scare the hell out of me. I know it did when I was a kid, but there are parts where it's sad and you cry, but there are parts when you cry because it's emotional and it's happy. And just this cast of characters in this is also fantastic. And yes, like I remember being, you know, like a 10-year-old girl and just looking up to Alexa and her story and her journey, and just I want to reread these as an adult just because I'm so nostalgic for them, but I just love this series. The series is the start of reading for me. This is where I started. And yeah, I owe a lot to this little series because it's got me where I am today as a reader. Alright guys, so those were my top 5 children's books when I read as a kid. I would love to hear what book series, aside from Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, that you guys really enjoyed as a kid. Obviously I have multiple different types of children's books on here. I have picture books and I have first chapter stories, so I'd love to hear your answers, and I'll see you guys soon with another video. Bye!